My name is Talia. I'm 25. I work in operations for a mid-sized logistics firm, and I used to love the low buzz of our office, the clacking keyboards, the coffee machine hissing like a friendly little dragon, the dumb jokes over the partition. That was before Emmett started. He joined last spring, 26, neat resume, clean smile, a crisp button-down you could use as a mirror if you needed to fix your eyeliner. He shook hands, said, "Happy to be here," and placed a brand new succulent on his desk like he was declaring peace. For 2 weeks, I tried being the welcome committee. I'm good at that, names, birthdays, which vendor will comp muffins if you sweet-talk them, who takes their coffee with oat milk and a tiny mountain of cinnamon. First morning, I asked Emmett where he'd moved from. Out of state, he said, eyes on his screen. Okay, shy. No problem. If you need recommendations, bars, grocery stores, a dry cleaner who won't destroy your buttons, hit me up. He nodded without looking, said, thanks. Full stop. At 10 a.m., when the guys gathered by the printer to argue about whether our city's baseball team had any chance this season, Emmett slipped into their circle like a fish darting into a school. He laughed, chimed in with stats, slapped one of them on the shoulder in that bro way. I remember blinking at how quickly he warmed up. A thermostat turned to summer for them and January for us. Maybe he was nervous around women, I told myself. That would have been the kind reading. But the pattern settled in fast. Warmth glowed when a man approached. Frost formed the minute one of us did. I'd say, "Morning, Emmett," and he'd give me a composed, "Good morning," without meeting my eyes, the period audible. If I followed with, "Did you see the thunderstorm last night?" he'd say, I logged off early and swivel back to Excel. If Jake from purchasing appeared 30 seconds later with, "Dude, that ninth-inning meltdown," Emmett would lean back, grin, and tell a story that lasted the time it takes to brew a pot. I tried to be patient. My deskmate, Priya, tried even harder. Priya is the human version of fresh bread, warm, soft voice, a kind of understated glow that makes everyone tell her things. She asked Emmett if he'd found a dentist yet. "I don't discuss personal services at work," he said. Not rude. Just like he was speaking to a customer in a store with a line behind them. She shrugged it off. Where patience started cracking was in the micro moments. We'd be at the whiteboard during stand-up, brainstorming how to streamline late deliveries, and if I pitched an idea, Emmett would nod and write the numbers, never my name, never any acknowledgement beyond, 30 seconds later, one of the guys would rephrase my point with a joke about slapping a duct tape fix on the route map, and Emmett would laugh, cap the marker with a flourish, and say, "Now that's practical." It wasn't hostility. It was absence, like a radio tuned between stations whenever a woman spoke. The first jolt of "wait, it's not my imagination" happened on a Tuesday when my car battery died. I mentioned it on a Teams call, half joke, half cry for help. Emmett said, "Let's keep the meeting focused." I swallowed it. An hour later, Marcus, IT, walked into the bullpen and groaned that his battery had died last month. Emmett spun in his chair, lit up like he'd been waiting all day for the prompt, and gave a 20-minute clinic on cold crank amps. He even offered Marcus a jump starter he kept in his trunk. When I walked by to refill my water, Emmett's voice softened with camaraderie. He called Marcus man twice. He didn't glance at me. Still, we made room for grace. The new guy might be awkward. He might have had a weird experience somewhere else. He might be a devout introvert rationing social energy. But then the no women perimeter turned, engineered. The guys formed a fantasy football league. Emmett brought donuts the morning team drafts opened, 3 dozen, maple bars still warm. He handed the box to the circle of men and parked it on their pod. When I said, "Those smell insane," he slid the box 2 inches toward the men, said, "Help yourselves, fellas," and snapped the lid shut as if to keep the glaze from catching a cold. By month 3, our little trio, me, Priya, and Lila, had started keeping a soft log. Not a gotcha list. Just dates, tiny facts, proof that we weren't reading dust motes and calling them ghosts. We wrote, June 9th, Emmett chats with Tom 14 minutes about weekend fishing, tells Priya busy when she asks about printer jam. June 14th, Emmett covers for Nick's late arrival, I'll update the queue so nobody flags you, ignores Lila's request to QA her order tickets, put it in the portal and wait your turn. The list looked petty in isolation. Together, it drew the outline of something we didn't want to name. The thing that pushed the outline into definition came during a team-building meeting, the kind with an icebreaker that tries too hard. Our manager, Aubrey, asked everyone to share one hobby off the resume. People loosened their shoulders. Tom plays rec soccer, Priya takes pottery, Lila fosters kittens. When the guys went, Emmett peppered them with follow-ups. What do you play, midfield or forward? Cone 6 or cone 10? Adopted at how many? He laughed. He related. He told a quick story about his brother's disastrous attempt at sourdough. When it got to me, I mentioned I've been hiking the fire roads at dawn to reset my brain. Emmett nodded politely once. No question. A minute later, Lila said she's learning portrait photography on weekends, and Priya joked about terrible early shots where the subject's head looked like a lemon. Emmett smiled at the table, nodded at us, and flicked his pen cap. For the men, he offered threads. For us, scissors. I don't want to be dramatic, Lila whispered to me after. But it feels like he stands up and leaves a shape where women are supposed to be. Priya kept the practical tone she uses when the warehouse is on fire. If it affects work, we address it. If it's just social, we let it go. The problem was, the line kept blurring. Emmett's silence around us wasn't just awkward, it was making the workflows brittle. If Lila owned a project and needed a quick calibration, he'd drop the link to the policy wiki and tag our manager rather than DM her back. If I escalated a vendor issue and needed him to confirm a tracking note, he'd reply in the team channel only after a man asked the same question. We tried direct. I asked Emmett if we could grab 5 minutes to align on the late batch process, neutral, non-threatening. He said, please send calendar invites for all professional matters. I sent one for the next morning. He declined with conflict. Fine, new time. Declined. A third? No response. Priya forwarded a thread where he'd set up an impromptu huddle for Nick and Marcus in 5 minutes flat. The difference wasn't capacity. It felt like policy, but only for us. Something childish in me wanted to test the perimeter. On a whim I disliked about myself, I walked to the break room at the exact time Emmett usually refilled his water. I asked whether he'd tried the weird new sparkling water that tastes like a lime remembered in a dream. He said, I don't mix personal and professional. Then Jake drifted in, and Emmett turned to him mid-sentence. Dude, those new citrus ones are wild, like someone had switched channels on the remote. My smile tightened into that brittle shape you hold so your eyes don't burn. It would have stayed an ugly office quirk if it hadn't started changing how we felt about being there. Lila stopped eating lunch in the kitchen because it hurt to be invisible. Priya, who can sue the snarling supplier with 3 sentences, started hesitating before speaking in meetings if Emmett was in them, the way you hesitate before touching a hot pan. And me? I found myself reopening my soft log at night, adding bullet points, trying to convince my future self that I wasn't making this up. That's when it shifted from annoyance to harm, when you start second-guessing your own senses to make someone else's comfort make sense. Okay, I thought enough. Be an adult. Use the channels. I drafted a note to Aubrey. Hey, I want to flag a pattern that's affecting collaboration. Aubrey asked us to document specific, job-relevant examples. We built a memo that looked like a mini research paper. Dates, times, screenshots, who asked what, who got responded to, the delta in tone between sure, man, on it, and submit a ticket. No adjectives. No labels. Just the behaviors, lined up like train cars. Before we sent it, Priya said, let's check his social to make sure we're not missing something. I told her I didn't love that idea. We weren't trying to stalk him, but she made a good point. If Emmett was painfully shy in general, we'd need to calibrate our expectations. His Instagram was public. It showed him at barbecues, in mixed groups, grinning with women from what looked like his old job. His Facebook was a scrapbook of brunches and bowling and a Halloween party where he dressed as a retro mailman and posed with a woman dressed as a letterbox, her arm tucked under his with easy familiarity. So he could be social with women, just not us. Our memo went to Aubrey at 9:14 a.m. on a Thursday. She thanked us, said HR would handle it, told us not to discuss it openly. I exhaled hard enough to blur my screen with breath and told myself that was that. Quietly, a little part of me started rehearsing the apology I hoped to hear, some version of, "I've kept rigid boundaries because of a past situation. I didn't realize I'd built a wall where a door should be." I would have accepted that. I wanted to accept that. Within 48 hours, rumors moved slick as oil. Not our doing, we kept our promise, but the men knew something was up because HR blocked 30 minutes on a few calendars. The vibe around Emmett grew protective. Jake patted his shoulder on the way to the kitchen. Marcus brought him coffee. Our supervisor, who once told me I was a linchpin, started speaking to me in measured sentences, as if I were a difficult customer on a recorded call. The HR meeting invite hit my inbox for Monday, subject line sterile, follow-up on collaboration concerns. It didn't say who else would be there. I didn't sleep well the night before. At 2 a.m., I lay staring at the ceiling fan, wondering why I felt like I was about to be cross-examined for asking someone to answer a chat message like a human being. Monday came dipped in that bright artificial light offices get when the blinds don't know what to do with morning. I walked into the small conference room with the glass wall you can't hide behind. Lisa from HR sat there already, her expression arranged into empathy the way you arrange silverware for a formal dinner. Aubrey was to her right, hands folded. One empty chair remained. I sat. Lisa thanked me for coming, set a notepad square to the edge of the table, and said a sentence that iced every hope I'd fostered. "Before we proceed, I want to make sure you're aware of the context Emmett shared with us about why he maintains strict boundaries with female colleagues." My heart skipped. Context? You don't say context unless you're about to hand someone a story like a hall pass. I folded my hands so they wouldn't show a tremor and said, "Carefully, okay?" Lisa took a breath like a swimmer at the edge of a pool and continued, eyes kind. At his previous job, he experienced a situation where casual friendliness with a woman on his team was misinterpreted as something else. It escalated into a formal accusation, and though it was eventually resolved, the process was traumatic for him. He's adopted a professional interactions only policy with women at work to protect himself from misunderstandings. The word that flared in my head was policy. Not boundary. Policy. A rule he applied to half the office based on our gender and nothing else. I could feel the pressure build behind my eyes, the kind that demands a release valve in the form of either laughter or tears. I chose neither. I kept my voice even. But his behavior isn't the same across the board. He's social with the men. He jokes, mentors, covers. With us, it's minimal courtesy. That's two standards. That's the problem. Lisa nodded, as if I'd said something both true and somehow beside the point. I hear you. And we also have to respect an employee's right to set professional boundaries where they feel vulnerable. That's when she glanced down at her notes, and the meeting tilted, like a hallway in a funhouse. Some team members, she said, also expressed concerns about the way you, Priya, and Lila have been monitoring Emmett's interactions, timing breaks to observe him, keeping documented logs of casual conversations. They reported feeling uncomfortable with what they described as, she checked the page, an atmosphere of surveillance. Surveillance. The syllables landed heavy, like a file dropped on a desk. I wanted to say the list existed because we needed proof that our experiences were not smoke. I wanted to say that the internet has taught women to gather receipts because otherwise we are told we misread the room. I wanted to say we were trying to protect ourselves in a place that made us feel invisible. Instead, what came out was a tight, we documented job-relevant behavior because it affected collaboration. We did not stalk him. Lisa's voice stayed steady, but I could sense where this was heading, the way you can feel a car drifting on black ice while the steering wheel pretends to be in charge. "We're not characterizing your actions," she said, "just sharing perceptions that surfaced during interviews." She set her pen down. "Based on our review, we don't find that Emmett violated policy." However, the door opened. Emmett stepped in, calm as a man who has already told his side and watched it land. He sat across from me, set his hands flat on the table, and met my eyes for the first time in months, not warmly, not coldly. Just there. Real. However, Lisa repeated, gentle, We do need to address the way this situation has escalated. My throat went dry. For a second, the room felt very small, the glass wall too clean, the hallway outside too bright. I could sense the next words forming in Lisa's mouth before she spoke them, could feel the shape of the knife and where it would slide. Going forward, she said, you, Priya, and Lila will be required to attend a professional boundaries training, and will be monitoring for any further behavior that could contribute to a hostile environment. The only sound in the room was the clock. 1 tick. 2. I heard myself say, quietly, so we reported differential treatment, and the outcome is that we get flagged? Lisa's eyes softened in a way that made me want to stand up and leave or maybe melt into the carpet. Nobody is being punished, she said. We're trying to rebalance the team dynamic. I looked at Emmett. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He just held my gaze with that same careful absence I'd been colliding with for a year. It felt like staring into a mirror that reflects only the shapes it prefers. I thought of Priya's soft voice, Lila's lunch going cold in its little glass container, my dawn hikes that had started as a kindness to my brain and turned into a way to build a spine. The anger I'd been restraining slipped its leash, not rage, not a scene, just the kind that squares your shoulders. I opened my mouth, not to argue, but to say the one thing I knew is true. Then please put this in writing. Lisa blinked. I'm sorry. The finding, I said. That a male employee can decide he won't socialize with female colleagues while fully socializing with male ones, and that this is considered a personal boundary, not discriminatory. Put it in writing for our records. For a fraction of a second, the mask trembled. Lisa glanced at Aubrey. Aubrey stared at a knot in the forward table. Emmett's jaw ticked, a tiny muscle clenching and releasing like a heartbeat. Lisa recovered. We'll summarize next steps via email, she said. Thank you for your time. I stood, gathering a notebook suddenly heavy as lead. When I reached the glass door, I could see the bullpen through it. The men clustered at the pod, someone showing Emmett a meme on a phone, heads bent together in the easy geometry of belonging. I pressed my palm to the cool metal handle, felt the bone-deep exhaustion behind my ribs, and understood with startling clarity that whatever came next wasn't going to feel like justice. I pulled the door open to step back into the office I no longer recognized, just as a new email pinged my phone with a subject line that made my stomach drop faster than any roller coaster I've ever willingly boarded. Documentation, outcome of HR review, conduct expectations and training requirements. The email from HR was clinical in the way hospital rooms are clinical, everything wiped to a gloss so nothing messy sticks. It used phrases like recommitment to constructive engagement and resetting norms. It attached a calendar invite for a 2-hour training called Boundaries and Professional Civility and a bulleted list of expectations that looked generic until you read them through the lens of our situation. Refrain from documenting peers' casual interactions. Direct concerns about colleagues to a manager rather than discussing among teammates. Avoid patterns that could be perceived as targeted observation. It didn't say our names in the body, but the invite had 3 blocks, me, Priya, Lila, and a line at the bottom, attendance is mandatory. I stared at the email, then at the office. The bullpen felt drafty. You know the feeling of walking into a cafe and realizing you are the only person not in on the joke? It was that, stretched across 8 hours, 5 days a week. The next morning, the look started, not dramatic, not anything you could screenshot. Just a softness around conversations as you approached, a sentence that stopped midway and restarted with a different subject. Chairs swiveled subtly away. You begin to notice shoulders, how they close or open depending on who stands nearby. I became a connoisseur of shoulder angles. At lunch, our usual kitchen table had space for 8. That day, there were 7 people and a strategically placed backpack filling the 8th chair. I stood there with my salad, pretending to read a Slack on my phone, until someone said, "Hey, there's room by the window," and pointed to a table where 2 interns were whispering over a spreadsheet. I ate by the window, the glass warm under my forearm where the sun pressed through. I counted the number of times laughter rose from the other table. 12. 13. 14. Priya tried to patch us together. We'll get through it, she said, and for a day or two we sat shoulder to shoulder as if proximity could deflect the draft. But even Priya started shrinking, not from me but from the gravity well the situation had become. She is conflict-averse in a way that makes her good at her job. She can de-escalate a vendor like a magician letting a dove fly out of a hat. This was not a dove. This was a brick. Her smile thinned. Her texts at night shifted from, ugh, to, do you think we overreacted? And finally to, maybe I shouldn't have signed my name on the memo. I'm not built for this. Lila was angrier. She tried to weaponize jokes, which worked until they didn't. Guess I'll submit a ticket to say hello to Emmett, she quipped once, too loudly, at the printer. Jake looked up from the paper tray, expression flat as a wall. Maybe don't, he said, and walked out with his copies like he was ferrying out the last of the oxygen. The training itself was held in a conference room named after a local street, the kind of bland attempt at culture companies love. A laminated sign on the door read "Session in progress, do not disturb." The facilitator was a woman who probably has the patience of a saint in most contexts. She had handouts with clip art of two coworkers facing each other across a dotted line called boundary. We sat there, 3 chairs angled together out of habit, while she talked about intent versus impact, about the right to opt out of socializing, about the importance of not forming ad hoc tribunals with your peers. It was surreal to hear your worst day turned into a slide deck. When she opened the floor for reflections, I could feel Lila vibrating next to me, a tuning fork hit hard. What do? I asked carefully, when one person's boundary is a pattern that only applies to one gender. The facilitator smiled the way people smile before stepping into a minefield. That's a complex situation, she said. Best navigated through clear policies and managerial support. But the policy we were given is that it's his right, Lila said, voice low and sharp. So what do? Wear masks that say, I am neutral, so he'll answer a question. The facilitator didn't flinch, which I respected. You focus on your work, she said softly, and you stop trying to fix him. We left with name badges that said completed in green marker, which felt obscene. I threw mine away in the women's room, watched the rectangle disappear into the silver mouth of the trash bin, and felt nothing like completion. News travels in offices the way smells do, through vents, faster than you think, clinging to fabric. Within a week, I could tell who had heard which version. The story for the men sounded like, he had a bad experience, he's protecting himself, the women overstepped. For everyone else, it was Messier but no kinder, drama. HR, don't get in it. The day after training, I watched Emmett's desk sit empty until 10 a.m., then an email came. Team update. Emmett will be transitioning to the analytics group effective immediately. Please route all inquiries through your manager during the handoff. Aubrey called it a development opportunity. The analytics group works 2 floors up, in a glass curtain space that glows at night like a spaceship. Promotions up there are like being blessed by a cool older cousin. The email had a line about cross-functional synergy. It did not say, we're moving him away from you. It did not need to. My screen blurred. I blinked until the black letters steadied. I told myself I didn't care about his title or his floor or the new laptop he'd get, thin and fast and sexier than any of ours. It wasn't about him winning. It was about what it made us look like, the problem to be relocated around. People started being ostentatiously nice to Emmett in public, the way you are nice to a kid whose parent is friends with the principal. There were handshakes at his desk. A cake in the kitchen with "Congrats Emmett" piped in too bright blue. Someone stuck a tiny plastic football on top, as if to say, see? Still one of the guys. I cut myself a sliver to be petty, then realized my fork hand was trembling, not from hunger, from humiliation. I put the fork down. I went back to my desk and finished the sliver there, each bite turning sweet into chalk. Then the gossip matured, the way bananas go from green to speckled. A new word started appearing in my periphery: harassment. Not applied to me in big letters, not carved into a wall, just breathed into the air enough times that it settled into people's lungs. I heard they harassed him. I heard they stalked him. Someone said surveillance, without irony by the copier. I imagined the memo we'd written careful, factual, being described at happy hour as a dossier with strings and thumbtacks. Priya shifted further away, not in affection but in self-preservation. "I need to stop discussing this," she said one morning, voice small. "I've got to focus on my projects." She didn't say I regret it, but the words hung between us like a translucent curtain. Lila held out longer, sardonic, scathing, brave. But one afternoon I found her in a phone booth with the glass door closed, head bowed, phone to her ear. When she came out, her face was composed, except for her eyes, which looked like someone had rubbed their thumbs too hard along the lower rims. "My mother says to stop making mountains," she said, with a laugh that wasn't one. "Imagine your life from outer space. Can you see this from there? No? Then let it go." She paused. I told her it feels like a mountain when you're standing under it. Our supervisor, Aubrey, who I had respected in a simple, uncomplicated way, shifted too. She started narrating our one-on-ones like a training manual. "Let's stay solutions-oriented," she'd say. "Let's focus on the work." She said work like it had a capital W, like it was a faith if you repeated it enough. She flagged my last review with needs to rebuild trust with peers and energy shifts team dynamics. Those are phrases you carry around like bricks in a backpack. Then the metrics cratered. Not because I forgot how to do my job, but because attention is a currency and mine was suddenly heavily taxed. I triple-checked emails for tone, scrubbed my Slack messages of warmth in case warmth could be misread, avoided any conversation that could be described as monitoring, even if it was the normal act of noticing things at your own job. While I contorted, tiny errors slipped through joints I didn't know I had. Aubrey called them unforced. She said them kindly, which almost made it worse. The night my mother called, I told her everything. I did the abbreviated version at first, the PG cut then. When she asked questions in that soft, careful way, I let the whole thing unspool. Silence stretched when I finished. Then, "You did what you thought was right," she said. "And you're paying for it." Both can be true. I lay on the rug staring at the ceiling, phone on speaker, and cried the kind of dry, hot tears that don't fall so much as evaporate. My mother didn't offer solutions. She said, "Go to the mountains this weekend. Walk until your body reminds your brain it belongs to you." I did. Saturday morning, I beat the sun to the trailhead. The world was a shell-pink blur, then it sharpened, the brush, the rocks, a hawk tracing geometry overhead. I climbed until my breath pulled like thread through a needle. At the top, the city lay out like a circuit board, silver lines, tiny cars, squares of glass that reflected a sky pretending to be endless. From up there, the office was nothing. From up there, Emmett was a pixel. From up there, I could pretend the story ended at "we'll be monitoring for further incidents," and that we all went back to work like grown-ups. I came down with my calves singing and my mind calmer, which lasted until Monday at 9:07 a.m., when I walked in to find a printout on my chair. No note. Just a page anonymous in that too specific way anonymity has when it knows where to land. It was a screenshot of a thread from our internal chat, taken from a private channel I wasn't in. A meme was posted, something stupid about HR when the girls start a book club about you. Then a reply from a username I recognized, "Should have filed a complaint sooner, dude." And under that, a reaction from Emmett, one of those laughing faces tilted back, eyes squeezed. I stared at the page until the letters swam. My chest did that hollow elevator drop. The screenshot had a timestamp from after our HR meeting. The channel name in the upper left corner, ***, back office banter, ***, one of those just for fun spaces that existed to blow off steam and post photos of pets in Halloween costumes. I felt a heat rise that wasn't rage, exactly. It was clarity spiking like fever. We were punchlines. Not just tolerated, not just ignored. A bit. A story to tell about us that fit better than the truth. I didn't know who had slipped the printout onto my chair. Someone who felt bad? Someone stirring? I looked up instinctively, and across the room, eye contact with Marcus was a fraction too quick. He looked away, swallowed, adjusted his monitor. I slid the paper into a folder with a practiced motion and felt the old muscle memory of building a case twitch back to life. Then I remembered the green marker, completed, and the email that warned us to stop collecting receipts. I sat very still. At 10 a.m., Aubrey pinged me. "Can you swing by?" Her office smelled like lemon cleaner and ink. She gestured for me to sit, folded her hands, and did that managerial half smile, the one that makes bad news sound like a performance review bullet point. "We need to talk about your presence on the team," she said, and I braced for the usual. She didn't give me the usual. "I'm putting you on a performance improvement plan," she said. I felt my face go still in that way it does when your body decides to freeze so it won't fly. "For what specific failures?" I asked, proud of the steadiness of my voice. She listed them. 3 late follow-ups that were late because I had waited for confirmation from a man who preferred not to mix personal and professional with me, 1 vendor complaint about tone in an email that I had copied word for word from a template, a dip in my collaboration score, a metric invented last quarter that tracks how often you post positive feedback in public channels. "This is an opportunity," she added. "It's a chance to reset." The word reset made me think of the laminated boundary line and the tiny clip art coworkers on either side. "Okay," I said, because what else do you say to a cliff edge but not again? That afternoon, I opened the PIP document. It had boxes to check and goals to hit and a section for coaching notes. It read like a contract you sign with a piece of furniture, promising to only sit on it gently and always with coasters. I felt very, very tired. Then, as if the universe wanted to make sure the day had a thesis statement, a company-wide email popped up. "Please welcome Emmett to the analytics pod as senior analyst." Senior. He had skipped a rung. The spaceship blinked brighter. I wanted to rage. Instead, I collected myself into something narrow and sharp and pointed forward. I would do the plan. I would hit the metrics. I would be so impeccably boring that nobody could find a hook to hang a complaint on. That was the plan I made at 3:17 p.m. At 3:22, my phone buzzed with a DM from a name I didn't recognize, HR Confidential. The message was a single sentence. "If you want your story to make sense, ask why he left his last job." I froze. The icon was our company logo. The account name shouldn't be possible. HR doesn't DM people with anonymous channels. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I typed, "Who is this?" No reply. The dot that means typing didn't appear. I stared at the sentence until the screen dimmed and went black, then woke it with a fingertip and stared some more. Ask why he left his last job. The context from HR had been vague by design. Trauma, misinterpretation, resolved. This message suggested the version I'd been handed had corners cut off. I looked up and saw Priya across the room, her eyes on me with worry that softened into question. I shook my head minutely. "Not yet." Lila was in a huddle with a vendor on speaker, voice smooth, eyes brittle. I imagined going to Aubrey with the DM and pictured the laminated line again. "No, not yet." At 4:01, my email pinged again. A calendar invite this time, automatic, not from a human, all hands, culture and belonging this Friday. The timing felt like fate or farce. The subject line felt like theater. I clicked accept. I opened a new note and typed, "Why did he leave? Who would know? What's public? What's rumor? What's risk?" Then I closed the note, shoved the printout deeper into the folder, squared the edges until they made a perfect right angle, and told myself aloud, under my breath so nobody could hear, "Don't blink." Because if there was one thing I wanted more than relief, more than vindication, more than the quiet life where I never had to learn how to spell laminated neutrality, it was not to be gaslit by a story that was missing chapters. If there was another chapter, I was going to find it, even if it meant walking right up to the edge of the policy everybody loved to quote and looking over. The anonymous DM burned a hole in my head all week. Ask why he left his last job. It looped in my brain while I brushed my teeth, while I sat in traffic staring at a brake light that wouldn't turn green, while I pretended to listen during a vendor call. I couldn't stop circling the same thought. If his past was the justification for walling women off like faulty wiring, then maybe that past wasn't what HR had packaged it as. Maybe there was more. Maybe there was worse. I tried not to share it with Priya or Lila at first. Priya was clinging to peace like a life raft. Lila's fuse was already smoking. But secrets rot in silence. Wednesday at lunch, I slipped the printout of the chat thread across to them, the meme, the laugh emoji. Lila's jaw set. So we're jokes now. Great. Priya looked pained. We shouldn't even have this. If HR isn't protecting us, I snapped before I could soften it. They're protecting him. And maybe the reason is sitting in his history. Priya whispered, "Do not go digging, Talia. That's how you get fired." But Lila leaned in, voice low. Or it's how you get the truth. That night, I typed his name into LinkedIn. His profile was neat, professional, bland. Logistics analyst at his last company. 3 years. Ended abruptly 6 months before joining us. No endorsements from women, I noticed, though plenty from men. I clicked through the likes on one of his old posts. Buried in the list was a woman whose profile headline read "Former colleague, recovering truth teller." It was nothing, could have meant anything. But my fingers itched. I didn't message her. Not yet. Instead, I Googled the company's name plus lawsuit. Nothing obvious. I added complaint, harassment, resignation. Buried on page 4 of the results was a small local article. Employee files grievance against logistics firm, claims mishandling of internal investigation. The article named the company, but not the employees. The dates aligned with when Emmett left. My pulse tripped. The article said, a female employee alleged retaliatory treatment after filing a workplace misconduct complaint. Sources suggest the complaint involved a male coworker, but details remain sealed. I sat back. If that was him, if that was the trauma HR was framing as false accusation, it meant someone else's story had been buried. The all-hands meeting Friday arrived like a storm you can see on the weather app, but can't divert. The cafeteria had been cleared of tables, rows of chairs facing a screen. A banner read "Culture and Belonging." The irony was bitter enough to taste. Aubrey opened with a smile that looked stapled on. "We're here to reaffirm who we are as a team." Slides followed, diversity stats, wellness initiatives, a new mentoring program. My colleagues clapped politely. I sat with my arms crossed tight. Then Lisa from HR stepped up. "We want to talk about boundaries and respect," she said. My throat went dry. I knew where this was going. She launched into a script about professionalism, about everyone's right to choose their comfort level. Some colleagues prefer to keep interactions strictly task-related. That is not exclusion, it is professionalism. That word again. Professionalism, as if it were armor only men were allowed to wear without question. I could feel Lila vibrating beside me. Priya kept her eyes on her lap, hands clenched. The men were nodding along, satisfied. Then Lisa did something reckless. She opened the floor. "Does anyone want to share thoughts about how we live these values?" The room hushed. Nobody ever volunteers at these things. It's designed that way, silence as compliance. But my hand lifted before I could stop it. Every head turned. My heart thudded like a trapped bird. "I want to ask," I said carefully, "at what point a boundary becomes bias? If a person speaks freely with half their colleagues, but refuses the same interaction with the other half based solely on gender, is that still professionalism, or is it discrimination in disguise?" The silence sharpened. Lisa blinked, caught. Aubrey shifted in her chair. From 3 rows up, Marcus muttered, "Here we go again." Laughter rippled, quick and mean. I forced myself not to flinch. We're told to respect boundaries. Fine. But women here deserve the same access to information, mentorship, even basic camaraderie as men. Otherwise, we're working in 2 different offices under one roof. Lisa's voice was calm but strained. "Thank you, Talia. These are complex issues. We'll continue to reflect on them." It should have ended there. But then, from the back of the room, a new voice cut in. "Or we could just be honest." Every head swiveled. It was a temp, Kendra, hired 2 months ago, quiet, efficient, invisible until now. She stood, hands shaking slightly but chin high. "I worked with him at his last company," she said. The room snapped into focus like a lens turning. He didn't leave because of a misunderstanding. He left because a woman reported him and the company failed her. I watched it happen. "And now you've let him build the same wall here." Gasps. Murmurs. Emmett himself, 2 rows from the front, stiffened like someone had poured concrete into his veins. His jaw set, eyes burning but mouth clamped shut. Lisa tried to regain control. That's not appropriate to discuss. But Kendra kept going, louder now. You let him frame us as threats. You punish the women who noticed. Do you know what that feels like? To be erased twice. The cafeteria dissolved into noise, whispers, shocked laughter, a few men shaking their heads. Aubrey called for order, but it was too late. The story was no longer theirs to script. I sat frozen, pulse hammering, as Kendra's words ricocheted in my skull. The anonymous DM. The article. The puzzle snapping together in public. For the first time in a year, Emmett looked straight at me. His eyes were unreadable, anger, fear, contempt, maybe all of it braided together. He stood, shoved his chair back so hard it toppled, and walked out without a word. The room erupted into chatter. HR rushed after him. Aubrey called for a 10-minute break. And me? I stayed seated, staring at the empty doorway, heart a war drum. Because the truth had finally cracked the surface and the fallout was about to drown us all. The all-hands never really restarted. HR tried to herd us back into our rows like kids after a fire drill, but the air had shifted. You can't pack an explosion back into the bomb. People clustered in tight groups, whispering. A few men defended Emmett. He's just careful, you know his situation, but now the whispers had a jagged edge. What situation? Who's lying? I walked out into the hallway with my pulse in my ears. Priya followed, pale and quiet. Lila was blazing, eyes wet but bright. Did you hear that? She hissed. We're not crazy. We're not imagining it. It doesn't matter if we're right, Priya whispered, voice breaking. They'll still blame us. HR hustled Kendra away, their hands light on her elbows, steering her like someone dangerous. She didn't fight. She looked relieved. Brave. That afternoon, the office was a pressure cooker. Emails slowed, phones rang unanswered, everyone peeking over monitors for updates. At 2:15, a message hit our inboxes. Effective immediately, Emmett has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Please respect confidentiality and direct questions to HR. The words looked neutral, but the impact cracked the floor. The men who had circled him looked stunned. One muttered, "Witch hunt." Others avoided eye contact altogether. The women, those of us who had felt the frost, sat with our backs straighter. For once, the silence wasn't against us. But victory? It didn't feel like victory. Because the next email came 20 minutes later. Reminder. Professional conduct. While we review this matter, we want to reiterate that gossip, speculation, and sharing of unverified information damages our culture. Please focus on your work responsibilities. Translation. We're already preparing to scold you again. That night, my phone lit up with texts. Priya begged, don't post. Don't say anything. Lila raged, if they bury this, we go public. I stared at both threads, thumbs hovering. The anonymous account hadn't messaged me again, but its single sentence still echoed, ask why he left his last job. The next morning, the cafeteria chatter had teeth. People had Googled. Someone found the same article I had. Someone else swore their cousin's friend worked at his old company and knew the story. The rumors swirled faster than HR could mop. By noon, Aubrey called us, me, Priya, Lila, into a glass-walled meeting room. Lisa from HR was already there. She looked tired, hair pulled too tight. We're in a very sensitive position, Lisa began, her tone measured. Yesterday's disruption was unacceptable. We need to prevent further escalation. Escalation? Lila shot back. A woman finally spoke up, and you call it escalation? Lisa's lips pressed thin. We will be investigating further. But your role now is to remain neutral. Do not discuss this case. Do not feed gossip. The company cannot afford more division. And what about us? I asked, voice shaking but steady. We were punished for noticing patterns, for documenting discrimination. Now it turns out our instincts were right. Do we get our reputations back? Silence. Aubrey cleared her throat. We'll review your records. But understand, trust is fragile. It will take time. Fragile. That word again. Always our trust on trial, never theirs. When we left the room, Priya whispered, I can't do this anymore. Her voice cracked like porcelain. I need my job. I can't be the face of this. She walked away, shoulders trembling. Lila muttered, "She's folding." "No," I said quietly. "She's breaking." That afternoon, Emmett's desk was cleared. His succulent gone, his chair pushed in. Just absence. A black hole that pulled the whole floor's energy inward. Some men still defended him. He never crossed a line with me. Others shrugged, muttering about HR politics. But I knew what I'd seen. The patterns. The walls. The double life between men and women. And now, maybe, the missing chapter from his past. The week ended with another all-hands, smaller, quieter, tense. Lisa announced that Emmett had chosen to pursue opportunities elsewhere. No mention of the review, no mention of Kendra's outburst. Just a clean, sterile erasure. People clapped politely. The meeting ended. We filed out. But the damage didn't vanish with him. At my desk, I found another note. Folded paper, no name. Inside, 5 words in block letters. "He won't be the last." I read it 3 times, the words burning hotter each time. My stomach twisted. Fear, yes, but also a spark of something else. Resolve. Because if the company wanted us silent, if HR wanted clean lines and polite lies, someone had to hold the story. Someone had to keep the receipts. And maybe that someone was me. Emmett was gone within a week. No farewell email. No handshake tour. Just a clear desk, a wiped profile picture in our chat system, and a vague company-wide message about transitioning to new opportunities. HR acted like he'd never existed, except for the way the silence bent around his absence. But the fallout didn't vanish with him. It clung to everything. The men walked lighter, like the air had been cleared for them. Jokes returned to the pod, louder than before, as if to prove nothing had changed. Some were careful around me now, overly formal. Others ignored me altogether, like I was contagious. When I walked into the kitchen, conversations shifted gears, like a radio flipping stations. The women carried something heavier, like a bruise you press without meaning to. Lila became sharp with everyone, even me, snapping at small mistakes. Priya, she went quiet. Too quiet. She stopped sitting with us at lunch, choosing instead to slip out with a book or eat at her desk. When I asked if she was okay, she gave me a brittle smile and said, "I just need peace." That was the last real conversation we had. HR never rescinded our reprimand. The sensitivity training stayed on our records. The performance improvement plan still hung over me like a cloud. On paper, Emmett left by choice, and we remained the troublemakers who had stirred too much. The anonymous note, "He won't be the last," lived folded in the back of my notebook. I read it sometimes when the office felt too clean, too normal. It reminded me that silence doesn't mean safety, that patterns don't stop just because one person is gone. I thought about contacting Kendra, the temp who spoke up, but she disappeared too. Assignment ended early. No goodbye, no trace. Just another erased name. The company didn't fire her. They simply let her fade out, like scrubbing a chalkboard clean. As for me, I stayed. Maybe that makes me a coward. Maybe it makes me stubborn. I told myself I needed the paycheck, the stability, the chance to rebuild. But some days, I think I stayed just to prove I wouldn't be erased so easily. Still, the cost was high. My performance reviews dipped. Opportunities passed me by. Aubrey's feedback was always the same. "Talia, you're competent, but we need people who don't create friction." Friction. That was the word they used now. Not passion. Not advocacy. Friction. Outside of work, friends asked how the office was going, and I lied. I said, "Fine. Busy." Because how do you explain to people that the worst part wasn't being ignored by one man, but being punished for daring to notice? Sometimes I catch myself remembering the early months, how hard we tried to include him, how hopeful we were that he'd warm up. I wish I could go back and tell myself, "Don't push. Don't try. Save your energy." But I can't. The damage is done. Emmett moved on, maybe to another company, maybe with the same walls. HR closed the file, confident they'd handled it. And me? I'm still here, marked by the whole mess in ways that don't show on paper. The office looks normal again, but I know better. Normal is just another kind of silence. And I've learned the hard way that in workplaces like this, Women who ask for fairness are remembered not as professionals, but as problems. And that's what I am now. Not Talia. Not a capable operations specialist. Not someone who tried to do the right thing. Just the problem. The cautionary tale. The example whispered about in break rooms long after I've left the building. And the worst part? They don't even realize they proved me right.